these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, everybody. We have a repeat guest on, Ed Calderon. He just got finished testifying to our Cartel Task Force committee here in Congress. And I want to give you, the audience, and my podcast listeners, yet another bite at the apple here as we get some updates from Ed and his expertise. Just to remind you, Ed Calderon was a police officer in Tijuana, Mexico for over a decade. Worked very closely with the U.S. and battling cartels throughout the mid-2000s, one of the more dangerous times in Baja California, in Tijuana, and just gave us a fantastic just debrief on cartel culture, cartel capabilities, and the problems we face in battling them from the Mexican side of it, and of course from our side of it. A couple of the questions I asked that I wanted to dig into a little bit, which was everybody's trying to figure out what we can do different. So you've got problems, and the problems that you've laid them out is that the police forces, local and federal, local, state, and federal in Mexico have been completely gutted. AMLO's prerogative has been to put all security responsibilities within the apparatus of the military, and now, I suppose one could argue that they're more incorruptible than the local police, but at the same time, as you've mentioned, they'll come into a town, but they don't know it. It's not their town,
yeah,
and that matters when you're talking about a counterinsurgency operation. And are we just too far down the rabbit hole to make any progress here, or what kind of capabilities or changes could reasonably be made?
Yeah.
Or does it just require massive political upheaval?
I think successes have already been seen in that field in Mexico, and I think I was part of one of those successes in Baja. Yes, corruption. Just let me paint a picture for what it's like to be a cop in Mexico.
Yeah.
When I became a police officer, I was trained for about 8 months in a paramilitary institution. It was very grueling. Physical abuse was there, psychological and all that, but like legit, like actually beatings and stuff like that. So that's the start of it. You go out and you don't have, now I think I talked to some agents now, they don't have life insurance. So you're not only working one of the most dangerous jobs on the planet, but you don't have life insurance. You try to go to the bank to apply for credit. You're not going to get credit. No cops, no bank in Mexico is going to give cop credit for anything, not even a house or a car. And everybody thinks you're a corrupt piece of, what, I get that a lot because I worked as a cop in Mexico. So you're immediately vilified. This is unsustainable for most people. And I understand why some of these people basically go into that life and end up where they end up. There was an effort done at some point to professionalize police forces in Mexico. I was part of it. And all of that is gone and gutted.
One of the things I noticed is we talk about this big operation against Ovidio in Sinaloa earlier this year, and it was a big operation. I'm not sure if that's when you were mentioning it. You mentioned it earlier, whether he was a key player or not, but it did turn into a giant gun battle. And these guys, because you have a very capable Mexican special forces. I'm very impressed by their capabilities.
Yeah.
They do things that we do. I mean, I'm impressed. And here's the problem. They get to the target and then they're surrounded by 200 sicarios with 50 cal machine guns attached to armored trucks. That is not a good situation to be in. Now, a Navy SEAL in that situation, well, we have a C-130 gunships or Predator drones up overhead, and they're just picking off these guys for us. I mean, that's warfare for us. And so it's a bad situation, but it turns into an okay situation. Mexicans don't have any of that. So that struck me as a very obvious thing that Mexico should be asking for from the United States, is just close air support capabilities, which they have none of. What do you think as things like, I'm just trying to look for, here in Congress, we're just trying to look for little things, little wins that we could do. I mean, it was recently announced, you mentioned 11 special forces are going to be potentially training in Mexico. I think that's, if the Senate ratifies it, the president was asking for, but 11, I mean, okay. I know exactly what that looks like, right? It's so maybe that's a permanent ODA, which is a special forces detachment. Who knows?
Both of us know, like, I was trained by NSW people in Coronado, and the training you would get is for a very specific task. And there's a lot of, yes, you better the operational capability. Yeah. But like I say, like, as a Mexican, I look at you and like, oh, what's that on your head? Oh, these are nods, but you can't touch them, and we're not going to show you how to use them because ITARs, you have a Mexican military that, yes, very experienced now. They're getting better. They're having direct action stuff a lot. They have gunships now that are supporting from the air and firing down into, giving them an advantage that has been consistently being utilized. They even used small single engine planes for the last.
Yeah, they use what they can.
They use what they can. But if you get involved, and I think most of these cases that have been successful because they managed to surprise their opponents.
Yeah.
But if they get involved in another, Culiacanazo, where like an active cartel is ready for them and is going to, basically Mogadishu the area, that's going to be a different thing. And that's what you saw with El Culiacanazo. Yes, the military is very capable, and tip of the spear, and their SF groups are great. Yeah. But when you get a giant urban uprising of a cartel that starts burning trucks and doing all that, doing a basically urban disruption of that nature, that tip of the spear is not good. You're not going to do anything.
No, you need an army. I mean, and they needed the army for that operation to actually go and save them. And it was crazy. We can go into it, but I don't even have a lot of time. You mentioned to our task force that this could be one of the most violent years ever. And I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, the reason you say that is because of the Jalisco cartel, the new generation cartel. They're a very different cartel than Sinaloa. Sinaloa is more old school, right? A little bit more Godfather. Jalisco, new generation, is a little bit more Tony Montana. Okay. Yeah. Is that accurate? Is that,
that's pretty accurate. I guess, I think, the old school, rules and regulations, and don't touch the local populace, and business as usual, and don't attract too much attention. It's something that it doesn't mean anything to the new generation cartel guys. It seems that way. And they're very much antagonistic with the federal government right now. So you see definitely a different animal with this organization. We are living through probably one of the most dangerous and violent presidencies, because the current president, AMLO, he criticizes Felipe Calderon, who's completely to the opposite of political spectrum, for starting the war. But his administration is going to be one of the bloodiest ones as far as death, and also all numbers. We have to trust those government numbers. And I used to work for the government in Mexico, and I wouldn't trust those numbers if I was you. Is all I'm going to say. The numbers are skewed. You're not counting missing and disappeared people, that because Mexico and some of these criminal organizations are able to make people disappear at an industrial level. I mean, they have crematoriums now.
Jeez.
So I think,
you find mass graves. I mean, and you were telling me Jalisco, new generation they terrorize young men. There was that story where 5 young teenagers were basically
each other.
Yeah, they were lured into a warehouse or something, or an office. I mean, who knows? Under the pretense that they were there to interview for jobs. Right? This was
a call center.
Call center. Right. So, and then they were offered the job to work for the cartels, take it or leave it, and they said no, and then they're dead. I mean,
they were basically made to kill each other.
Yeah,
in front of a camera. This is, again, If you
This
want
is
to
like, this is ISIS level crazy.
if people want to worry about something, that this is the evolution basically of it. It's an environment where
It's a-
where they're trying to dominate, and you can't dominate in an environment like that if you're not upping the level of violence, and this is what you're seeing.
What do you make of the Sinaloa cartel's announcements that, you know, they're moving away from fentanyl production, and anyone who engages in fentanyl production will be murdered? I mean, they've put it out in their cartel banners, which people listening, cartel banners are like exactly what they sound like. Cartels put out banners over bridges that go over highways, you know, basically like billboards.
Yeah, I mean,
And they make their announcements that way.
again, it's a clear delineation of a cartel that wants to play by the rules and kind of keep things quiet, and another one that
But do you think
doesn't.
it's real?
I think
Do you think it's real, or is it?
I think it's pretty real. I think it's they engage in propaganda and in information campaigns as well. I think it's very real. I think I think last year or 2 years ago, AMLO, the president of Mexico, showed up to La Tuna, the hometown of El Chapo Guzman, and told the citizenship that they should be buying local drugs and not Chinese drugs to support the local economy. He mentioned it. I don't know if it was a joke or not, but he said it in front of the cameras. What you see, I
Interesting.
think, with those banners is like an attempt for the local or organizing efforts of that federation of cartels that is in the law to calm things down or to lower the heat, as they say, bajar el calor.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
But it's an interesting example of them posting things like that, and another cartel that would never do that, because they don't care. They're just moving forward.
Yeah. And I've just been trying to figure out whether it is just propaganda meant to take the heat off of them. But that being said, they're still producing fentanyl and shipping it. This is obviously one of the bigger concerns for Americans.
I think
They're still doing it, obviously. And it also, I also tend to think that what they're really worried about was the price of fentanyl going too low. And so they want to kill off suppliers that are doing it, outside their licensing.
that could be an issue. That could be a case as well. I mean, you see one big aspect of this that a lot of people kind of miss in the US is that some of these cartels are actually fighting for local drug markets that maintain their power structure. Like this is where they are. This is where they operate from. And I guess sometimes they post things like this to basically keep the local populace on their side. You have, a few people ODing off fentanyl, and then now the local populace is really upset to whoever sold them that, and the cartels are going to, point fingers. I guess that could be a factor. But these groups basically fund and operate in part by the local drug markets that they're in control of. I mean, that's their daily check, basically.
Do you think, if we had some magic diplomatic revelation with the Mexican government, and they started a serious military cooperation agreement with the United States, similar to the ones we've used in Colombia, and you use that model, and look, I get, we could talk for a longer time, and I think it'd be really interesting to talk about like how different Colombia is from Mexico culturally, and where that resentment comes from about American forces. It's very old, but it's there. And I think there's a bit of mythology behind it. I'm not, there's plenty of countries in Latin America that are convinced that the CIA has given them all of their problems. And I'm like, we don't have that kind of power, guys. There's just a little, but anyway, if we were to be able to convince them of that, what kind of effect would that have on the cartels? My sense and my opinion tends to be that it would have a very serious effect, because deterrence matters. And if the enemy thinks that you're coming after them and you're finally serious, they're going to change behaviors.
Yeah.
And that's, what do you think?
Naval blockade on the Pacific side of Mexico, and watch the private money in Mexico scream for a change. Naval blockade, check
So
everything coming into Mexico. I mean, that's where fentanyl is coming from,
Right.
Just
Well, it comes from everywhere. That's it's a hard problem, because it actually comes from the US too.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's going a lot of places, but the main source of it, and some of the stuff
Yeah.
that's being put into pills, that's being put into heroin
Right.
that then
It goes through Monsanto.
so I don't know. I guess for me, I think what makes things change in Mexico is the private sector, and I'm aware
Yeah.
that Mexico is currently in gold rush territory when it comes to foreign investments. The peso is stable as hell, and it's probably because Mexico is on the verge of being the next China when it comes to when it comes to being a manufacturing hub.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that is
that's our mutual goal.
I think I think that's the angle. I think that's the angle. That's worked in other parts of Mexico at a micro level, and
Mhm.
you know, Mexicans, the majority of Mexicans don't want this problem or this issue around them.
Right.
I have family in Mexico that had businesses, and 4 months ago they got a visit by somebody trying to extort money off them, and they're going to burn their business if they don't pay up. You know, this is a daily thing
Yeah.
that people deal with in Mexico. You go into a room and ask, "Hey, who here have experience with abductions?" And you'll see more than a few hands raised. Imagine that, going into a room in the U.S. and asking, "Hey, who here has had a family member abducted and killed?" And you had half of the room raise their hands. That is a normal in certain parts of Mexico. You know, you say this term and it raises. People are fed up too in Mexico, but they're very distrusting of the government. And they're very distrusting of the US as well because of generational historic trauma. So um, something does have to change, or else you're going to see. And I mean, we saw the murder of a few suspected associates of this Sinaloa cartel being murdered after the arrest of Eleni in Sinaloa, and this happened in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So if people want to figure out if this problem isn't already here or tied to things that are happening on the state side, it's already here. We're already in the part of it where we're intertwined with this problem. And I think
What is the, like, your average Mexican, when you say they don't trust the United States because of the, historical drama, like what is the historical drama that your average Mexican points to?
the historical trauma of the last Mexico-American War, which in history classes and just culturally we learn about as a theft of land from the United States, after a war.
Yeah.
That is a historic trauma that Mexicans have. Another one is
Very long time ago.
I know, but it's we're, it's still
1846.
it's still a sore subject. Generally, politics in Mexico have gone to the left, so it is in vogue to be a counter capitalist imperialist, and
Yeah.
there's a bunch of pro your enemies support parades everywhere in Mexico. So it's in vogue to hate the U.S. in Mexico right now,
Right.
in a lot of segments. And again, we have a president who's openly antagonistic to the United States, and he's a supporter of all the people that you don't support in South America, and basically houses a lot of these not friends of the U.S. in Mexico right now, and supporting. He's giving
Yeah.
fuel to Cuba.
Wait.
Yeah,
Well,
he's
so I mean, I get all this from the older political generation, and but like it's not like I don't have Mexican friends, and I'm not well traveled in Latin America. I don't get this. I still, maybe I'm just whistling past the graveyard. I still refuse to believe that your average Mexican really gives a shit about the Mexican American War. And if they did announce some kind of real military cooperation, which is honestly meant to build up the army, give it credibility, but also deter further violence from the cartels.
Yeah.
Because look, we have various examples that show that the Mexican cartels are terrified of the U.S. Remember in Matamoros when they accidentally kidnapped 4 Americans, and how quickly they tried to make that one better.
Perdón.
Hey, all we have to do is say that we're going to do something, and they will change behavior.
I understand that, but we also have to realize that Mexico and the people of Mexico have witnessed the extent of U.S. interventionism in other parts of the world when it comes to what happened in Iraq, what happened in Afghanistan. These are all fresh in people's minds, and in Mexico as well. And you'd be surprised about how many of them, how many of us were looking at what was happening out there and mentally thinking like, oh, that's what a modern invasion would look like from the US.
Yeah.
Because
They
again,
really think, yeah, it's interesting.
so this is the mental. And again, you're the perfect villain, for Mexico. We have the saying.
We are for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the saying in Mexico, Mexico far from God and close to the United States. It's that ingrained. It's not that it's anti-Americanism specifically, but the government and not trusting the U.S. government specifically is what is at the core there. There's thousands of Americans living in Mexico. There's thousands of Mexicans living in the United States. We're tied by blood, culture, and we're just neighbors. And I understand that's kind of hard to fathom that a large segment of Mexico or the people of Mexico are distrusting of the United States and view you not as a heroic force that might come in to fix everything. I think it's just it's a cultural thing. And also
Yeah.
now with the current presidency and the way things are politically, it's something that's being fostered, more.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it also depends on who you talk to. I'm not sure that's the case in your more educated Mexico City social circles. My friends are like, when are you guys finally going to do something? I mean, I hear that a lot from
Yeah.
Mexican people, a
Yeah.
lot.
I mean,
So, maybe something's changing. I don't know.
yeah, some people, I guess I've heard that from some people, like somebody needs to do something. But there is definitely politically,
Yeah, there's
and in a majority,
undercurrents.
there is an undercurrent of resentment and distrust of the United States, and it's being completely fostered by the current administration.
Okay, last question. I know you got to go. How are you feeling about the elections coming up soon? AMLO's going to be gone.
Yeah.
What do you think about the
Yeah,
future there?
everything is set just as AMLO wants, so that makes me really nervous. He has he picked his candidate. All the rivals that he didn't want to be on the ticket for his party are gone, so it's an AMLO ticket. There's no political rivals to be seen. Xochitl Galvez, who's the opposing, basically all the opposing parties joined behind her. She's not exciting. She stutters. She had a prompter fail on her. She's not exciting. Nobody's gonna vote for her. There's another young guy out of Monterrey, the governor of Monterrey, who basically gonna make a run for it. He's playing into AMLO, basically separating he's basically taking apart the opposition by going into the race. So everything's set for a continuation of power, political power for the Morena party. Now,
So who does that mean? Is Claudia? What's her a German last name? Sure.
Sheinbaum,
Yeah.
Claudia Sheinbaum, highly educated, to the left, extreme left, and very much a continuation of what we saw politically with AMLO.
Our only hope there is, you got to say what you got to say to be a politician, but she's currently a mayor of Mexico City and has done a decent job from what I understand.
That's what we hear. She had a police chief who was very corrupt, who also wanted to be on the political ticket and got kicked off because of that corruption. So again, nobody's clean in politics in Mexico. I get it. But
Yeah.
I foresee a continuation of the status quo and getting worse. If this is, then I don't see any sort of change politically coming in Mexico in the next elections. Everything's calm, and the elections are already in the bag for the current ruling party.
Yeah. And a key question for us is, because we can only control so much, but what we can't control are levers of influence, and whether those are carrots and sticks. And I think you've made the point a few times to us on the task force and on the podcast, which is private money is that main lever. That's the only thing to truly influence change. And I think that was a key lesson that I underlined very much so when you were talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to see a solution, again, go back to Baja and what was done there by the governor, Jose Guadalupe Osuna Millan, who very much kind of was very instrumental in implementing these policies in a
Right.
whole state like Baja, and it worked.
Is there a case study? I mean, that's worth a case study and in our report. I mean, what is there a book written? Is there something?
There's a study out there somewhere that I've heard it mentioned a few times. I'm going to try and look for it, but you go down there and ask around in the security sector and say, where has this worked? And Baja comes at the top of the list.
And where is there? Like Baja is like a state. Right?
Yeah, Baja
So
California. Baja California, right now it's right, right under California.
But like, what's the capital of Baja?
Mexicali.
Okay, so Mexicali. So what includes Baja? Tijuana, Mexicali, is this Cabo?
Ensenada,
Cabo
Tecate. No, that's Baja Sur. It's a giant segment of the country. But what needs to be done has been done before at a state level, and it worked. The problem was that it wasn't continued. It was like, oh, work is done and politics change.
It would just be really interesting to get your help to try and put together a string of interviews and people to talk to and places to visit to do that case study. I think that's really important for our work.
Yeah, the main man that I would want you to be in front of and talk to is Lieutenant Colonel Lezola, who is actually currently trying to make a bid for the municipal presidency in Tijuana. Him and Lieutenant Colonel Lezola and Jose Guadalupe Osuna Millán, the former governor of Baja. Both of these men were instrumental in coming up with one of the only, if not the only, major successes when it comes to some of these issues in Mexico.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe after this podcast, but I know you got to go, and we kept you. So Ed Calderon, everybody, thanks again for coming on, and I appreciate the work you do.
Thank you.